So when I was leaving my screening last night, there was someone who was just saying every single French word they probably knew in their vocabulary. So if tourism skyrockets after Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris comes out this weekend, we know who to thank. Yes, we're thanking Mrs. Harris for going to Paris. Bonjour, je m'appelle James, and today we're getting right into my real review of Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. And no, don't ask me to say any more than that in French because I really don't know much more than that in French. A huge thank you to Focus Features for giving me the chance to watch this early in theaters for review, but you can check it out when it drops this weekend, July 15th. But when you see it, let me know down below in the comments exactly what you think of the film. Did you enjoy it? Did it almost make you cry? Because I can neither confirm nor deny that I got into my feelings. Now, the film actually stars Lesley Manville, who plays our titular character of Mrs. Harris, and her co-stars are Isabelle Huppert, who plays Madame Colbert, Jason Isaacs, who plays Archie, Ellen Thomas, who plays Vi, and Alba Baptista, who plays Natasha. Now, the story on the surface is actually pretty simple, but I do love all the subplots that surround it. So if you don't know much about the film, we'll get into it in just a little bit, but before we do, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love talking about movies, TV, and all the news in between. So if you do too, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on the bell, and hit the thumbs up button if you're a big fan of these like feel-good comedies. I know I am, and hey, let me know again down below in the comments what you thought of the film when you see it, and which Lesley Manville movie is your favorite. I think mine might be Phantom Thread, maybe? Alrighty, so now let's dive right into what Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris is all about. The story does surround a widowed cleaning lady named Mrs. Harris, who in 1950s London falls madly in love with a couture Christian Dior dress and decides that she must have one of her own, so she goes all the way to Paris to try and find it. So it's funny because I actually saw the preview to this movie before watching Elvis, and I was always really excited to see Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, and I'm happy to report, guys, that yes, this is one of the most pleasant movie-going experiences of the year. So this is how we're going to begin our positives, and it's on a good note. This movie has charm, a bit of wit to it, and it's just a warm embrace that I didn't think I was going to get by the end of the movie. Even amidst the backdrop of a workers' strike in Paris, this movie finds a way to both be very cognizant of everything going on, so it's very pro-worker, and also it's interesting to see how they play with the romance in this movie. Even though it is rated PG, there's still enough for everyone, and I love that Mrs. Harris was in the middle of it all. So speaking of this character, let's get into Lesley Manville's acting, because to me, she was perfect for this role. She's a legend in Hollywood, so it comes as no surprise to me that she was able to balance a lot of the nuances with her character, whether she was incredibly funny or really emotional. But this is a character who really is at the surface starting out as a maid, but then by the end of the film you start to see that she's much more than that. She's almost an icon to some of these people in Paris, even though she was just a visitor, but her love, her selflessness, and everything that she really expressed in this movie was something that I feel like I needed to see and also be reminded of. And I loved her moments with Vi, who's played by Ellen Thomas. She's confident, and I also love that they're best friends because it really bled through the screen. And it got me thinking, are they really good friends in real life? Because man, Ellen Thomas and Lesley Manville do a really good job here, and I love their story, even though it's more in that supporting role. You get a little bit in the beginning and a little bit at the end, but it was still enough to make me smile. And I know I mentioned a little bit earlier, but there are also a few subplots here that really grabbed me, and they all involve love in one way or another. And eventually I learned that this movie's core message is less about what good fortune happens to Mrs. Harris and more about how Mrs. Harris goes ahead and pays it forward. And that is actually pretty darn good, but that also opens the doorway for her helping some of her friends that she's made along the way. My favorite subplots really were between Mrs. Harris and Marquis. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. Then you have Mrs. Harris and Madame Colbert, and my favorite maybe, Natasha and Mr. Favel. That was the one that got me in my feelings quite a bit, because both Natasha and Mr. Favel are characters who I'm like, alright y'all, maybe I can kind of see myself, relate to this a little bit. It's very interesting to see how both of them eventually, I don't know, there's a resolution there between these two characters that I really enjoyed. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention exactly how much I loved Alba Baptista's acting as Natasha. She does a very good job as the it girl for Christian Dior. And then you have Lucas Bravo, who plays Andre Favel. He handles the finances for Christian Dior, and man oh man, does he do a good job at being that nerd in a way that eventually musters up some courage. But of course, this movie would not be complete without the Christian Dior element of it all, and there's some beautiful cinematography, some amazing dresses and costumes, so let's talk about it all. As we know, it is Mrs. Harris's dream to buy and wear a Christian Dior dress, so when we finally get Mrs. Harris in Paris and she visits the Dior house, those moments were elegant and captivating with some really good cinematography to boot. It was actually pretty cool to see the double dolly shot that Spike Lee is known for used here in this movie. Whenever Lesley Manville is infatuated by the dresses or going through the fitting room, you see her kind of just gliding along as the action is happening around her. And it is beautiful, it adds a unique touch, and it's not overused, which is good, but it is used whenever she is just captivated by these dresses, and it actually helps kind of separate the film from some of the other more feel-good PG type of movies that you might see this year. And then there's the fashion show sequence that was just marvelous to see through Mrs. Harris's eyes. Anthony Fabian really directed the heck out of that scene. And I do love the subtext here as well, which is the workers are very important and they make up the Dior house and probably a lot of the other high-end fashion brands. So that was a lovely addition to the story itself. But then you also have the costume design, you guys. And yes, the costume design here is excellent, and this is basically a shoe-in nomination for best costume design at next year's Oscars, because there is nothing, I have no negative notes about the dresses themselves. They look absolutely incredible, and hey, if Cruella can go ahead and get high praise at different award shows from last year, I don't see why Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris can't be the front runner right now. And honestly guys, when it comes to Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, sometimes a lighthearted romp is needed among the more serious dramas that we usually get throughout the year. And that's exactly what this movie is. Yes, it's PG and you're not getting some groundbreaking storytelling, and it doesn't do anything incredibly new for this sort of genre of movies, but when it works, and it does that pretty often throughout the film from start to finish. And I also love the score here by Raul Jones, which sometimes borrows similar piano elements from Michael Giacchino's Up, while still making this music very unique to the film. I was actually more attached to scenes because of the score sometimes, and it really put me into this setting. I almost felt like I escaped for about an hour and 50 minutes, and if that was the objective of the film, well, it succeeded. But guys, with all that being said, this isn't a perfect movie because there are some elements that I feel like could have been a lot better for it to be a film that maybe is even in my top 10 this year. So let's get right into the negatives with this. The movie does overstay its welcome a tad bit in the third act. I did feel like this movie could have been at least 20 minutes shorter, and if it was tighter around the edges, we might have actually seen a better film. And that's because the movie sort of just lingers at the end there, and it could have ended in like two different places, but it didn't. So I was almost wondering why we needed to stretch it out as much as we did. And while the sappy moments work for me, the movie does play into them quite a bit down the stretch. So if you're not okay with some convenient things happening in the story, then you might think that this is not for you. But hey, I mean, if you guys know me, I'm all about the sappiness, okay? I love it. And this next negative point is kind of not a negative, it's a positive and a negative, because you have Isabelle Huppert, who is a great actor, and she is good as Madame Colbert, but she is underused throughout the film. I almost wish we would have gotten more moments between her and Lesley Manville's character, Mrs. Harris, because it would have helped a pivotal moment between the two of them towards the end feel much stronger and maybe have more impact. They sort of just rush into that moment, and it's not that I didn't see it coming, but at the same time I'm like, we could have maybe had a little bit more time between them one-on-one for this to feel a little bit more impactful. And the movie itself also gets off to a bit of a rocky start. It struggled to get out of the gates, and it had me thinking that maybe our screening cut off a chunk of the first act. And it's possible that that might have happened, but maybe it didn't cut out anything significant. I'm not sure. But the thing is, I know that there are certain things that happen in the first 20 minutes that made me think, were we supposed to get any sort of precedent for this? Because this is very random, and I don't even know if I was supposed to know about this before. Maybe they dropped it in a line of dialogue that I missed. missed, but something about the first act just felt like there was a little bit of a piece of it missing. And lastly, you guys, while the cinematography is good to great at times, I really don't think the choice to use a blue hue for daytime scenes helped. Now, could that have been our projector at this AMC that I screened the movie at? Maybe, but I do feel like it was on purpose, so there are daytime scenes in Paris and back in England, and I don't necessarily think that it worked. It looked very distracting, and it actually took away from some of the vibrance of scenes where we find ourselves in a flower shop or in a garden or outside where the beautiful sun is shining. It took away from that gleam, and instead it added this weird blue hue over the screen that made it look either at the fault of the projector again, or maybe it was just on purpose, but if it was, it wasn't a great choice. But overall, you guys, Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris is one of the most pleasant films of the year so far, and it really does feel like a warm blanket. Seriously, this movie is incredible. It made my heart pitter-patter at times, and I was rooting for our titular character of Mrs. Harris to not only find love, but to find her place in the world. And this movie is so good at expressing a few different important messages, but at the end of it all, it is just so pleasant. You have Jason Isaacs, who I know is in the supporting role. He's a great actor, but when he's on screen, he shines alongside Lesley Manville. And I think that's the MO for this movie, is that whenever you're paired up with Lesley Manville in this film, it's going to be pleasant. And the story is heartfelt, it's easy to digest, and honestly, this movie includes some strong performances that at the end of the day really made it an enjoyable time at the movies. This doesn't demand a lot of thinking, honestly. This is a very basic, top-level kind of story, but man, oh man, was Mrs. Harris a joy. This is seriously one of my favorite movies of the year, and that's like something I never thought I would say after coming out of this screening, but man, it surprised me and I really enjoyed it. So when you guys go and see it this weekend, or if you don't and you do catch it on streaming, go ahead and let me know down below in the comments exactly what you think of this film. I have no idea if it will come to streaming after it's 45 days in theaters, but if it does, I think it would do a killing on streaming services. And hey, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on the bell, and hit the thumbs up button again if you enjoyed reviews just like this, because guys, we got a lot more coming, and I mean that, especially with San Diego Comic-Con next week. I got a lot of reactions on the way. Alrighty, you guys, again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening. I gotta figure out how to say I'll catch you at the next screening in French. How do I do that?